Within 33 hot seconds, Donald Trump called across a charged congressional hearing and denounced Jasmine Crockett a traitor, inciting the room to half fury, half horror storm as cameras recorded every flutter of her unblinking eye. What came afterward didn't shake Washington. It redefined the book on political survival. When the most influential man in the room shouts you a traitor, what do? Under the blinding light of television cameras, the marble pillars towered, like giant sentinels over a war-torn plain, masquerading as a hearing room. Every seat filled to the brim, the air heavy with weeks of pent-up tension. Despite the agenda, national security spending, everyone was aware that this was no run-of-the-mill debate. It was a powder keg waiting for an ignition point. Camera crews moved stealthily, searching for the moment that would capture the night. Trump leaned forward, clutching the microphone so hard the metal stand shook in his hand, his voice booming through the chamber with hammer-like force. This woman is a traitor to the United States. Arrest her now. The words didn't just ring. Out they exploded, splintering the tenuous calm. MAGA loyalists in the back of the room stood up, pumping fists as they chanted, "Lock her up! Lock her up!" Across the aisle, veterans sat in starched uniforms with eyes narrowing and jaws set, while minority rights activists leaned forward, faces etched in stone as the slur cut deeper than any headline. Each camera eye turned to Jasmine Crockett, the red tally lights burning like sirens, millions at home sitting poised for her response, knowing that reputations could be made or broken in a moment. She sat stock still, her pose a statue of defiance, quiet, pointed, and unyielding. At CNN, an anchor whispered, "She's not saying anything. What's her move?" While at Fox News, a pundit sneered, "Guess she didn't anticipate that." But people could sense it. The silence wasn't defeat, it was the deliberate, slow draw of a sword. Trump reclined with a self-satisfied pull at his mouth, certain he had taken the reins, live feeding his base the drama they desired. But he didn't see her. Right hand creeped toward a thin black envelope or the slight head nod she made to the committee clerk. He didn't notice the technician in the rear rousing a sleeping monitor with a soft touch on the console. The chants boomed again, shaking the walls of the chamber. In the front row, veterans shifted uncomfortably. An activist shared pointed. Glances as outrage turned to anticipation. Social media was afire with hashtags such as hashtag Crockett BS Trump and hashtag Treason or Truth, drawing more attention to the broadcast second by second. Trump believed he dominated the room, oblivious to the trap already in place. Jasmine remained still as the yell, the blinding lights, and his self-satisfied smile swept over her. Her unblinking eyes fastened on him like a sniper on target. The seconds seemed to pull out so far that they were almost elastic. The atmosphere changing from charged to tense as commentators and announcer booths hushed their voices, not wanting to interrupt the mood. Those who knew recognized. This was a silence sharpened to the edge of a razor. The kind that cuts deeper than a scream, a silence that promised that an answer blow was already in the making. Deep in the heart of Capitol Hill, in a tight Detroit apartment, a single mother's coffee went cold as her narrowed eyes remained glued to the TV. In rural Texas, a sunburned veteran craned forward in his recliner, medals shining as the chants reverberated through his speakers. In an Ohio factory break room, a Latino worker turned off sports highlights and yelled to a coworker, "Turn this up. You must see this." 3 strangers in 3 corners of the country, connected by a tight thread of expectation, waited to observe Jasmine's move. Trump fidgeted in his chair, rolling his shoulders as if prepared to cruise to the wind, his hand drumming the microphone. With a staccato metallic clank, "Cat got your tongue." He taunted, provoking laughter from his back row diehards, their chuckles inflating his ego. Yet Jasmine's gaze never wavered. She was letting him build his wall of overconfidence, brick by brick. Her right hand brushed the lip of the black envelope like a reminder of the instrument it concealed. The committee clerk tensing beside her as a technician down the room caught her eyes, his hand resting over the switch marked main screen. The trigger that could turn this hearing into a sideshow no network would be able to cut away from. Someplace in the sea of bodies. An old hand in the front row breathed out slowly, the only noise piercing the chorus as a young woman who stood behind him broadcast the moment to the world live, her phone screen lighting up with comments. She's frozen. No, she's setting him up. Look at her eyes. For Trump, that silence was empty air he felt he commanded. For Jasmine, it was rope she allowed him to draw closer and tighter with each sentence. She wasn't paralyzed. She was thinking, and her calculation was all but finished. Her fingers wrapped around the black envelope, pushing it toward the clerk without releasing her predator's gaze. The clerk picked it up both hands, looking uneasily between her and the chairman as she stepped towards the control panel at the dais' edge. A soft hum hung in the air as the far wall's enormous monitor flared from black to blue deep, its sudden brightness capturing even the most busy eyes. Then, unmistakable voice trumps, deeper and slower than his rally cry. If we give them the policy change they desire, they'll take care of us, and the rest will sort itself out. A pause, then a muffled man's voice, even with the sanctions. Trump's response was quick, almost laughing. Sanctions are nothing if the payoff is large enough. The words hung like gun smoke. For 2 beats, the room was so quiet. The soft hiss of the recording was heard over the PA. Then the explosion audience gasps. Harsh inhales from committee members, the crash of a binder on a desk. Trump lurched forward, his eyes narrowing, as if he could will the audio into submission. Fake? Totally fake. He shouted, but the quaver at the edges of his voice betrayed desperation. A camera focused on his clenching jaw and the bead of sweat sliding along his temple under the blinding lights. In the gallery, the veteran shook his head slowly, incredulity carved into every crease of his weathered face. The young woman, live tweeting, clapped a hand over her mouth before she typed frantically. Is this real? Oh my God, that's his voice. This is larger than I anticipated. Across America, living rooms hummed with the same shocked intensity, people reclining forward, eyes fixed, hoping Jasmine would talk or allow the recording to make her point. She opted for the latter, allowing the silence build until the oppressive weight of the tape fell home. When she did break her silence, her words were measured, clinical. If telling the truth is treason, then maybe the dictionary needs updating. The words fell with a weight the chants in the rear couldn't suppress. A few Republicans fidgeted in their seats, ducking the stroke of the cameras. Trump jabbed a finger in her direction, chanting fake like a mantra, but equilibrium had shifted in the room. His previous smugness was supplanted by restless agitation. Jasmine did not blink, did not even sit back. She waited, knowing, and now so did they all, that this was but her first move. Trump assailed once more, sneering she's not even qualified to be here. Her so-called education is a joke. She's just a puppet for radical activists who hate this country. His bass grew loud with approval, stamping in chorus, but Jasmine did not rise to the bait. She flipped another page in her pile of papers with slow, measured deliberation, her serenity almost insulting compared to his fury. A faint grin played at the corner of her lip, captured by the lenses and transmitted to living rooms across the country, initiating a flurry of rumor. What does she know that he doesn't? Trump, assuming the calm was weakness, pressed further. She's only here because the media requires their identity politics strong game. Without them, she'd be nothing. He leaned back with the self-satisfied slouch of a man who believes he'd deliver. The killing blow. But in the gallery, the veteran narrowed his eyes, intuiting something was shifting, while the live streamer zoomed in on Jasmine's hands, firm as she turned each page. The comment feed flared. Why is she not looking at him? She's scheming something. The country was holding its collective breath. Trump filled the moment with more barbs teasing her name, dredging up her record, taunting her hometown, each barb answered by that same still turning of the page. The quiet rustle audible space between his words. This wasn't ignoring. It was allowing him to perform, allowing him to spin his own noose. And then, in the space of one beat, she glanced up, meeting his gaze with a frozen stare that arrested. him mid-sentence. Are you done? She said, not smiling now. Before dropping her eyes again, the words suspended like a knife. Each of the insults had been a strand, and now she was ready to wind the noose. She placed her papers on the desk with careful deliberation, the soft thud ringing through the chamber, and pushed a thin folder down to the clerk. Her voice remained steady but firm. Let's get some facts into the record. Mr. Chair, I move to have this made part of the record as Exhibit A. Without objection, so ordered, the chair answered. The clerk opened the folder, hesitated for a few seconds, and then passed it to the technician, who started uploading its contents. The monitor burst into life with a chain of emails marked by the signature of Trump's inner circle and closest aides. Cold. Clinical words drew up directives to channel unused veterans' health care funds into private ventures with aligned partners. A subsequent email made it clear millions designated for hospital improvements, mental health initiatives, and prosthetic treatment had been funneled into foreign investments. The Times corresponded with times when VA hospitals had indicated deficiencies of critical supplies. A low, heavy hum swept through the room. In front, the veteran sat with elbows forward, knuckles white, as a younger veteran beside him cursed under his breath, jaw tight with repressed anger. Trump growled, out of context, completely out of context. But his voice trembled on the second iteration, revealing a flicker of tension. His gaze flashed to Republican members on the dais, hoping for a supporter. But none looked back. One gazed at the ground. Another fixed his eyes on the incriminating text burning on the enormous screen. All over America, veterans sat, paralyzed, in their living rooms. In Houston, a retired Marine picked up the remote but could not quite force himself to switch the channel. In Montana, a widow of a veteran froze while folding laundry, lips pursed into a pale white line. Online live stream chats blew up. This is reprehensible. They robbed from our vets. This is politics gone too far. Jasmine did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Those funds were promised to the men and women who served this country, she said, her tone steady but weighted like a verdict. Instead, they were funneled into private ventures. You can call that whatever you want. I label it betrayal. The term betrayal weighed more than the silence that came after. And then pandemonium erupted. Republicans pushed forward, finger-pointing and screaming objections, Democrats counterattacking, voices crashing into a cacophony of sound. The gavel of the chair rang against wood, the stinging report reverberating off marble, that only fueled the din. Representative Crockett, you are out of order, she shouted, hand above the kill switch that could mute her mic. But in the gallery, advocates and veterans already stood, phones held high. Broadcasting each second to the thousands? Don't you ever cut her off. We're watching. The people need to hear this. The force wasn't only within the hearing, it was coming through on every screen across the country. The chair hesitated, his hand paralyzed by the burden of public scrutiny. Jasmine remained still, eyes fixed on him, challenging him to trigger the button. A Republican from Florida stood in, voice thick with disdain. This is a travesty. She's grandstanding, using veterans as props. On the other side of the dais, a Democrat from Illinois lashed back. The only travesty here is stealing from those who bled for this country. Their yelling enmeshed as the chair battled to regain order. Trump reclined, observing the commotion as if he understood how to use chaos as a weapon. A diplomatic nod to a supporter was enough to get a motion to suspend the hearing called. Procedural bomb intended to terminate Jasmine's challenge without muzzling her. Gasps spread as it was seconded, notifications buzzing across the country. Hearing might be shortened. A veteran in Philadelphia pounded his fist on the table. A retired nurse in Phoenix quietly growled, "Don't you dare." The chair requested a vote, but by the time the first "I" was about to be uttered, Jasmine's mic flashed green. Her voice cut through the thunder like broken glass. "You close this down. You're not defending the committee, you're defending him." The words stunned half the room. Then, her voice low and needle-sharp, Leaning forward, she asked, "You want to know where this evidence is from?" Long pause, cameras zooming in on her face. "He's here, right now, in this room." Heads turned toward the gallery as confusion rippled through the chamber. Trump's jaw clenched, his eyes nervously darting around the room like a man who had lost his footing. The air changed. This wasn't politics anymore. This was betrayal in real time. Jasmine held up her hand, palm flat, her finger extended toward the third row back of the press area, where a man sat immobile, posture stiff, a tiny American flag pin reflecting on his lapel. "Mr. Caleb Morton," she went on, "Donald J. Trump's former senior security advisor." The name landed like a bomb. Gasps, whispers, hard pulls of air. Morton did not move, did not blink, his clasped hands alone revealing a tiny tremble. Trump's voice broke again. "He's lying, just an angry employee." But it was too late. Jasmine had flashed the clerk a signal, and the main screen flickered. With a photo of Morton in the Oval Office, leaning over Trump's desk, dated 2 years ago. One frame that yelled access, trust, closeness. Camera zoomed in on Trump, showing beads of sweat forming at his temple. In America, viewers watched him move, eyes flicking between Morton and Jasmine, weighing his odds of reclaiming the reins. In the gallery, reporters rushed to shout out Morton's name. Half of the country would hear it before adjournment. Jasmine settled back, allowing the moment to breathe before continuing. "He sat in your meetings, Mr. Trump. He heard your cries, and he's here to speak the truth." The words fell like a last push over a cliff's edge. The gavel of the chair cracked for order. The snarling tension drowned it out. Trump's eyes fixed on Morton, and for a momentary instant, raw fear entwined with recognition in his gaze. Everyone present started to realize the traitor was nearer than he imagined. As the buzz continued to ripple from Morton's disclosure, Jasmine addressed the clerk. "We've discussed the deals. We've discussed the names, but I want you to look at what those deals are worth." Her tone was calculated, judgmental. The lights dropped. The big screen flashed, not with papers, but faces. First, a beaming young Marine with his wife and baby. Then, years later, smiles erased, the child ventilator dependent. "Here is Sergeant Michael Hayes and his family," Jasmine started, her speech slowing so every word sliced deeper, undefined. "He went to Afghanistan, took shrapnel in his spine, and was promised a lifetime of treatment for himself and his family." She paused before going to the next picture, a termination notice of benefits stamped in red coverage revoked. The ensuing silence wasn't respectful, it was the thick quietness of a wound ripped asunder. Jasmine's voice, laced with bitter frustration, sliced through the room as she revealed how Trump supporters diverted millions from the Veterans Health Program into overseas contracts, while families such as Michael Hayes sold their pickup trucks to keep the lights on and cover their child's breathing treatments. Veterans in the front row gritted their caps, Hayes' ill child looming behind Trump in the frame. As Trump's smirk broke as bank records scrolled on screen of offshore shipments mere moments before Hayes' benefits were taken away, a silent America watched as Jasmine called this a betrayal across parties, the applause raw and unstoppable. Trump, clearly shaken, attempted to belittle her, but she answered his jibes with the measured, deliberate jab. "I fight for people. You fight for yourself," a blow that changed the energy in the room. Then, with impeccable timing, she produced a contract signed by Trump, making an illegal sale to a sanctioned foreign entity, authenticated on the spot by a forensic expert in handwriting. Gasps coursed through the room, eyes of Republican allies flashed with self-protection. And Trump denials became brittle, as hashtags such as #caught and #contract trended on social media. At that point, the hearing became a public accounting rather than a political fight, and Trump's hold on the room began to fray strand by strand. Trump sat stiff, holding the table in a white-knuckle grip, his eyes flicking from ally to ally for reassurance and finding silence. The whispers were not from the public gallery, but from his own supporters, the once sturdy shield wall cracking. Jasmine allowed the silence to fill the room until the distant hum of the lights captured it. the cameras pausing on nervous looks and jumping knees. On social media, split-screen feeds amplified each tell Jasmine's unflinching intensity on one side, the discomfort of Trump supporters on the other, making a hearing into the gradual downfall of a stronghold. A journalist's biting question regarding party allegiance cut the air, followed by another regarding the contract, the crisscrossing chaos conveying an image of an beleaguered man. Jasmine leaned forward, her tone as delicate as glass. If you can't trust those around you, Mr. Trump, how can America put their trust in you? The silence was deafening, louder than any cheer. Then came Senator Victoria Kane, a rock of the party's mainstream, who coolly defected. If that is true, we need to investigate. A murmur of gasps ran through the chamber as Trump glared. At her, eyes narrowed in betrayal, but Kane met his glare, unwavering. The drama ended when a figure in a mask emerged from the third row. Caleb Morton, Trump's ex-senior security advisor, who, under oath, verified the proof existed and suggested worse, but not yet visible. Spreading papers on the table, Morton asserted, "This isn't politics. This is sworn truth," each word having the impact of a gavel strike. As the hearing recessed, social media exploded #truth over treason trending. Jasmine's dismantling of Trump replayed millions of times, veterans saluting her in viral posts, and even late-night hosts abandoning punchlines for stunned silence. Trump's allies scrambled to counter, but every denial was met with, "We've seen the receipts." Across diners, union halls, and VFW posts, Americans argued, toasted, and rallied, the fight transcending politics into a cultural reckoning. By evening, in the public's court of opinion, the judgment was already clear. Jasmine's name was a battle cry, and America had picked a side. The tension of the hearing finally broke when Trump slammed his hands down on the desk, the slap of them, resonating through the marble chamber as he barked, "Fake news," to millions watching at home. His face flushed crimson, jaw clenched like it might snap. But Jasmine Crockett remained motionless pen, resting lightly, gaze steady. Each cable bang made her composure more unnerving. Then the hot mic caught one of his aides muttering, "Sir, you're making it worse, fueling the spiral." Social media went wild with memes. The desk bang looped over a pop beat. Jasmine's serene face tagged, "Unbothered." Even Republican supporters shifted uncomfortably, whispers for nods, while Democrats allowed Trump's anger to do their work. Outside, shouts of "truth over treason" spilled into the broadcast. When breaking poll figures flashed on the chamber screen, independents 82% for Crockett, veterans 78%, women 81%. Trump's shoulders slumped in the first visible indicator he was losing command. Cameras recorded each move, Jasmine peacefully flipping a page, anchors labeling it the obituary of his credibility, while staffers texted the horrible numbers across the country. Trump grumbled about fake polls, but the words seemed tinier. Then, grasping the table, he pushed back his chair with a shriek and exited amidst a tempest of flashes of light, leaving Jasmine sitting calmly and unmoving, the peaceful core of turmoil. Commentators soon compared who resembles a leader and who fled from battle. By morning, headlines announced the moment as historic. Sergeant Hayes' widow wrote to Jasmine, "We saw everything." Steely voices of steelworkers, farmers, and nurses. From across America hailed her calmness as strength, and experts described it as non-reactive dominance, silence as power. Her writings as Trump departed went viral as the pen outlasts the storm, even reaching Sydney and London as pundits wondered if this was the beginning of Trump's political fall, undefined in Congress. Legislators confessed they could no longer pretend not to notice the questions or evidence had raised. The fight had changed, and Jasmine was now a force the nation could not turn away from. That day, Jasmine stayed out of sight of cameras altogether, not press conferences. No interviews, only a brief statement to her staff. The work speaks for itself. It was the same equanimity that had presented itself in the hearing room. The unwillingness to pursue noise when the truth was already ringing out across the nation. By lunchtime, one thing was certain. The dialogue had changed. and it wasn't changing back. The shockwaves from the hearing did not subside. They intensified. By the second day, Congress hummed with closed-door negotiations on toughening whistleblower protection legislation, a subject that had lain in dust for decades. Legislators who couldn't see eye to eye on lunch orders were now penning bipartisan bills. A sense of urgency kindled by the picture of Caleb Morton removing his mask before the country. Staffers murmured about how quickly the legislation might advance, aware of the public eye remaining fixed on the aftermath. Off Capitol Hill, the streets narrated their own tale in Atlanta. Young activists created a giant mural of Jasmine's face with the words "Truth over Treason" in huge letters. In Los Angeles, religious leaders from several denominations gathered for a unified rally, casting her defiance as a moral lesson for the nation. From reservations of Native Americans in the Dakotas to immigrant enclaves in New York minority, communities recognized her not as a politician, but as a guardian, one who would not back down when the full might of power bore down. Cable panels attempted to steer the discussion back towards election predictions, but the video continued to pull them to one conclusion. The hearing was more than political drama, had uncovered cracks in the country's defenses and sparked a debate over whether truth-tellers could ever be safe in a system designed to punish them. Even Trump's strongest supporters became measured in their language, feeling the tide of popular opinion shift. In a Detroit diner, the veteran took a sip of his coffee and said to a local reporter, "If she can stand up in that room, maybe we can stand up out here." His words resonated in community meetings, school auditoriums, and union halls, making Jasmine's moment a rallying cry for something greater than any single hearing. By the end of the week, reform petitions had tens of thousands of signatures. Congressional switchboards were flooded with calls for action. And the spotlight was no longer on one confrontation, one hearing, or even one presidency, because some battles echo far beyond the room. As the sun fell behind the Washington Monument, long shadows stretching across a sea of humanity, flags waved not as emblems of divisiveness, but as rallying points for responsibility. The air was charged, thousands holding their collective breath, waiting for one voice to pierce the din. Jasmine took the microphone, the applause almost deafening. She didn't wait for silence. When truth is called treason, she started, voice firm and angry. "Patriots must speak louder." The words crashed like a drumbeat, rolling over the crowd, rebounding off the walls of history. Veterans wearing tattered caps stood alongside young activists, holding homemade signs. Immigrants enveloped in the flags of their native countries stood, alongside single parents holding children, all united by the moment they had just seen on live television. Jumbo screens towered on either side of the stage, showing a montage, the gasps in the hearing room, the whistleblower's disclosure, Trump's exit, Jasmine's unblinking stare, eyes in the crowd transformed from pride to resolve. A young woman wiped her tears, holding her father's hand. A retired steelworker extended a fist in wordless solidarity. Hunched into the podium, Jasmine spoke. "This isn't about me, it's about every worker silenced, every veteran forgotten, every family told they don't belong. They believed the story was over when they silenced me by cutting my mic, but you've taught them they don't get to finish it." The crowd burst forth, a tide of sound that pushed against the twilight. She allowed it to break before issuing her final question. "If you were in that chair, would you speak?" The following silence wasn't hesitation, it was distilled determination. Of choices already known, somewhere among that multitude of people, destinies changed. The truth, she reminded them, is like a candle in the storm frail, dancing on the verge of being extinguished. But if someone guards it, that flame can illuminate the darkness. Courage isn't not being afraid, it's staying erect in the knowledge. The storm is approaching, so if that day arrived for you, she asked, would you preserve the flame alight? If your heart pounded with excitement or your fists clenched watching this story, don't hold back like this video. Share it with someone who won't bend to intimidation. And subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where bravery talks louder than terror. And every sentence can flip the script. Ring the bell icon, because the next chapter is already being written. And when it falls, you'll want to be here the second the first word hits. Now, we want to hear from you if you were in that chair, facing that tempest. What would you have done? Leave your thoughts below. Let's not simply watch history. Let's write it. This dramatized account draws from real battles, real voices, and the real cost of silence, not to divide, but to remind us what's at stake. Undefined thank you for watching. And remember, truth doesn't fade when the lights go out. It waits for someone brave enough to switch them back on.